I hear different things in different countries because in some countries there's a requirement that prenatal vitamins have iodine. That's not the case in the US. You can market anything as a prenatal vitamin with there's no rules really.
Welcome to the podcast. This is Tracy Donegan. Today I'm speaking with Lily Nichols. Lily is the author of several books, including Real Food for Pregnancy, and her latest book is Real Food for Fertility. We discuss misinformation around pregnancy nutrition, the policing of pregnant women's diets, and common deficiencies in standard preconception and pregnancy nutrition. And now I bring you Lily Nichols.
Hi, everybody. You are very welcome to my podcast. And I am so excited. I'm so excited every guest that I have, but I'm extra excited today to invite Lily Nichols here to chat about some of the amazing work that she has done in the birth world around pregnancy nutrition, specifically gestational diabetes, which is a huge topic all of its own. But I remember reading Lily's gestational Real Food for Gestational Diabetics when it first came out, and I was just so blown away by, I guess, how guidelines and actually what women need in pregnancy there was this massive gap that nobody really seemed to know about. So I'm really excited to talk to you about your previous work, why you first of all, why you got into nursing and then specialized in nutrition, and tell us about what you're working on next. I can't wait to hear about your preconception work that you're doing.
Yeah. And to clarify, my training's as a dietitian, not in nursing.
Okay.
So I know the RDN confuses people because you could choose to use either. You could choose the RD, or you could choose to use the RDN, and it means the same thing. You just add nutritionist on the end, but it throws it off because it looks like RN.
Yes.
So I just want to clarify, I don't want to present myself as a nurse here when I'm not. I've really been interested in nutrition my whole life. And once I finished my training and got my credentials, there was an opportunity to work in the gestational diabetes space, which I was totally green to be honest. I mean, I had a handful of clients with gestational diabetes in the hospital in my internship, but we really didn't learn that much about it. And I was working with the California Diabetes and Pregnancy Program, and that's where I learned just how vital blood sugar control is and proper nutrition is during pregnancy, not only for the mom's health, but also for the baby's lifelong health. Their lifelong risk of diabetes is higher if mom doesn't have very great blood sugar control. And on the flip side, they can have no difference in risk of them developing diabetes if their mom's blood sugar remains in a healthy range for the majority of the pregnancy. So that's really what lit me up about this work and got me into it. I guess the challenge clinically was that, I started as, being a good rule-following dietitian. I found that when I implemented the dietary guidelines for gestational diabetes, they really didn't work very well for my clients. And so I was left wondering, did they fail the diet or did the diet fail them? And my opinion is that the diet failed them and we can do better for these clients. That's the whole reason I wrote Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. And from there, it is just kind of like snowballed into what it is today. I mean, people wanted a book on general prenatal nutrition that wasn't all blood sugar focused. And I was like, okay, just follow the gestational diabetes book. It's mostly the same. We all need good blood sugar balance. But there's so many cans of worms to open about the guidelines, why they were set the way they are, how there's new data showing that we can do better. So what ended up turning into Real Food for Pregnancy, my second book, was much more than just a rehash of the first one. I mean, I really went into all the areas, the foods to avoid, the protein requirements, the micronutrients, the supplementation, the lab tests. It kind of snowballed into a much bigger project than originally anticipated. So yeah, I'm generally, my work these days tends to focus around sort of finding those gaps in the guidelines, understanding how they were set, the limitations, and then areas where new research has identified that, maybe we could do better. Maybe we can optimize this. And I continue to write and teach.
So when it comes to, we'll talk about a little bit about pregnancy nutrition before we go into prenatal. So
Yeah.
in our preconception, what are some of the biggest myths or misinformation that you tend to kind of still see being regurgitated out on social media when it comes to dietary guidelines and what women really and babies really need?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's just we want to trust that the guidelines are accurate, but they aren't always. And so I tend to see people just sort of rehashing the same information that's always given out. You need, say, like the amount of protein, you only need X amount in pregnancy. And really, the original guidelines were not set on data from pregnancy almost at all. And we have new data showing that actually we way underestimated how much protein you require in pregnancy, especially towards the end of pregnancy. I see incorrect information given about folate, which types of folate your body can actually utilize versus the type that everybody tells you to supplement with. That's a big one. I see incorrect information really around food safety. So you're often given this lengthy list of foods to avoid. Most of the time it's for concerns over foodborne illness, which I agree, we should not be eating food that can get us sick. However, like the relative risk of getting sick from these foods is really, really small many times. And on the flip side, some of the foods we're not told to avoid in pregnancy, at least in the United States, like raw fruits and vegetables, actually account for the majority of foodborne illness that we actually see. It's kind of like a weighing of the benefits and risks of different foods. I'd say those are some of the biggest issues that I see. There are others. I mean, I could probably keep going for about 10 minutes on the long list that's out there.
Yeah, so basically there's a lot of misinformation that continues to be perpetuated. So in other words, everybody just needs to read your book, and let's just start there from a level playing field where everybody understands what's the latest research and what's going to be beneficial, and then moms get to decide for themselves. Is that tuna roll gonna weigh
That's
your
right.
money?
I think it's just about I feel like it's like in the foods to avoid conversation. Like I cannot guarantee that any food that you're going to eat is going to be perfectly safe, but the chances of an egg being contaminated with salmonella is like 1 in 12,000 to 1 in 30,000 eggs. So you can take that information and decide for yourself, do I want to, still consume my eggs with runny yolks, or do I want to cook them until they're hard boiled? What if you don't enjoy them when they're all the way cooked with a solid yolk and you're not going to eat eggs anymore? Well, you're probably going to want to supplement with choline because you're going to be deficient in that nutrient, like almost guaranteed. So it's up to you. I'm not here to tell you do X, do Y. It's like, here's your choices and these are the trade-offs, and you make that decision for yourself. I mean, I think we should all be coming from a place of empowerment rather than fear. And many of the recommendations are kind of fear-based in nature.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's that policing of pregnant women of what you can eat or not. I'm like, are we not past that now? Like we're dealing with grown women, not 5-year-olds that
right. It's very patronizing.
Which snack shall I have? Yeah. So in what are you seeing these days with in pregnancy? Before we even go to kind of preconception, in pregnancy, what are you seeing are the most common deficiencies when it comes to nutrition?
Gosh, there's many. Vitamin D deficiency is fairly rampant, and that's one that's pretty easy to test for, which is why we can identify it so easily. Insufficient choline intake is a major one as well. An estimated 94% of pregnant women are not consuming enough. Plus, you couple that with some newer data we have showing that maybe our choline recommendations are too low and should actually be doubled. And that's concerning if already 94% aren't even meeting the lower benchmark. Iodine deficiency is another fairly common one. We assume that in the West, where we have iodized salt, iodine deficiency is no longer a thing. but it actually affects about half of pregnant women, particularly those who aren't consuming fish, eggs, or dairy, or any combination of the three. Those are really the major food sources, and many prenatals lack iodine, unfortunately.
Mm.
I hear different things in different countries because in some countries there's a requirement that prenatal vitamins have iodine. That's not the case in the US. You can market anything as a prenatal vitamin with there's no rules really.
Hey there, if you're enjoying this conversation and are passionate about women's health and wellness, the best way to support our work is to subscribe and share this episode with other amazing women in your life. Your support is so important to us and helps us reach more women with empowering content. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and spread the love.
And that can set you up for a potential deficiency. So with those three foods being animal sourced foods, of course, women who aren't eating much of those or completely vegan are at a much higher risk for iodine deficiency. I would say another one I see fairly commonly is a B12 deficiency. The needs do increase. There's some data suggesting the recommendation should actually be triple what we currently recommend for intake levels. And again, B12 is unlike iodine, where you actually can get iodine in plant foods. The richest source is actually seaweed. We just don't consume much of it in the West. For B12, the only reliable food source is animal foods. And so for people who aren't consuming many animal foods, B12 can be potentially deficient, and you often need a separate supplement higher than what's found in a prenatal vitamin to maintain levels, unless you're taking a prenatal that's particularly high in B12. So yeah, that's another common one. I could keep going, but those are definitely some of the top hitters.
So and of course you can, so yeah, I'm trying to think of like somebody who is newly pregnant and really wants to, look after themselves and get on the right kind of nutrition track. So vitamin D, we can test for. B12, we can test for. Iodine, iodine wouldn't normally be a test that's run in a general blood panel.
Yeah, you can run it, but the most accurate test for iodine deficiency is a urinary iodine concentration, or UIC. And ideally that's over 150. I can't remember the units off the top of my head. But you can look up, urinary iodine concentrations and see where you're at. Oftentimes, like, they could be a spot check, but usually they want to collect like 24 hours worth, because it can shift depending on what you've just eaten, right? But that's the most reliable marker in the literature. B12, you could add to serum B12, could be added to a panel. You can also check MMA levels, methylmalonic acid, to see if that's off. That can indicate B12 deficiency. Or an elevated homocysteine can be indicative of a number of possible deficiencies. B12 is one of them. So if you happen to run homocysteine and you see that high, then you could do some further digging into whether it's folate or B12 and kind of see what's going on there.
And with that, can you also get a similar panel done for choline to see what your choline levels are?
Choline is tricky. I don't know anybody that regularly, like routinely measures choline outside of research studies. I mean, there are micronutrient panels that include choline. The challenge with like full micronutrient panels in pregnancy is sometimes the reference ranges for things are different during pregnancy, and not all of those have been defined for every single micronutrient. So it's a little bit tricky to interpret accurately, because your blood is more dilute when you're pregnant, right? Sure. And we expect different shifts in metabolism, like just how you see with hemoglobin and hematocrit targets changing, or even serum ferritin, like your expectations of ferritin might change by trimester because of that hemodilution, or hemoglobin A1C for checking blood sugar, like that becomes pretty inaccurate as pregnancy progresses, because your red blood cells are turning over more quickly. They're not sticking around in the blood as long to get glycated, and your blood is more dilute. So it's tricky. I don't know somebody that's testing offhand like an added choline, but I suppose that could be added. It might have to be a specialty request though.
I'm just trying to think of, because I'm meeting more and more moms who really want to, and starting preconception as well.
Yeah.
Really get their house in order
Yeah.
right from the beginning, which of course, in, first trimester, you have organogenesis, and, this is a crucial time to be, on top of your nutrition. But what are your thoughts on uh, the A1C? Because I think you had mentioned in the past that doing an A1C in the first trimester will actually give you an idea of, okay, what you've been eating I think A1C is for the last 3 months, and kind of like what your baseline blood sugar is. So it'll give you an idea of where you need to maybe read
Yeah.
more of the book.
So yes, preconception, I mean, is the ideal time to run all of these labs. So you could run a full micronutrient panel and you don't have to worry about the reference ranges being accurate or not. And you can also optimize the intake of those to bring those nutrient levels up prior to conception so that you have sufficient stores for supporting the formation of all the organs and all the complexities that happen during the embryogenesis period, the formation of the placenta. All of that is so heavily nutrient dependent. This is why we've had decades-long campaigns on awareness about folate sufficiency for preventing neural tube defects. So yes, all for the preconception labs if possible. When it comes to A1C, checking that preconception would be great. It can also be checked still in the first trimester to give you a proxy of average blood sugar levels in, as you said, the last 3 months. And anybody who's falling in the pre-diabetic range, so 5.7% or higher, is at a higher risk for gestational diabetes. And some guidelines, like California Diabetes and Pregnancy Program guidelines, they actually recommend A1C as an alternative screening method for gestational diabetes in the first trimester. So you can, and we did this in practice. I worked at a very busy perinatology practice in Los Angeles, serving the underserved population. And we would screen A1C routinely on everybody first trimester. And sometimes you're catching people with overt type 2 diabetes that have no idea. I mean, once the A1C is 6.4% or higher, I mean, sometimes we'd catch people with like an A1C of 10. And sadly, I mean, it's very sad, but when blood sugar is that out of range, often the pregnancy just ends up not being viable because high blood sugar is a teratogen. It causes birth defects, and often that triggers a miscarriage. It's absolutely tragic. But we would also catch people in that kind of intermediate pre-diabetic range, and per the guidelines, we would treat them as if they had gestational diabetes. So they would see me for gestational diabetes education. They'd get a blood sugar meter, and we'd get them, in place with all the dietary guidance and increasing their movement levels safely and whatnot. And then you have, 2/3 of the pregnancy to intervene versus waiting for 24 to 28 weeks. That said, A1C is not an accurate proxy as you get later on in pregnancy for the reasons I already outlined. And so if you're looking for, alternatives to screen for gestational diabetes, you have to choose something other than A1C at that 24 to 28 week mark. If you do check A1C, because you can continue to check it, you could check it to see like a trend line at whether the A1C is decreasing. In a normal pregnancy, A1C, or in somebody who has great blood sugar control, the A1C should actually be coming down later in pregnancy with that increased red blood cell turnover and the more dilute blood. But you'd want to see it well below the pre-diabetic range later on.
Fascinating. So it is interesting. I think maybe it's just the demographic that I'm working with that are very much biohackers and want to look at everything on Reddit that's new and can kind of help them in their pregnancy. So when we look at then preconception, so tell me a little bit about what your new book and new trainings and what you're doing in the in the preconception period for everybody.
Yeah, so I mean, preconception is absolutely vital. Everybody has been asking me or pestering me for a book on preconception fertility for a while. And this book has been in the works for years, actually. So my book on fertility comes out February 14th that I co-authored with my friend Lisa Hendrickson Jack. She's an amazing fertility awareness educator just as obsessed with the research on fertility and hormones in the menstrual cycle as I am about nutrition. So we've really packed in a lot of data into this book. And it really outlines, where we can improve in terms of like dietary choices, how different levels of macronutrients affect your chances of conception, just improve pregnancy outcomes overall. Like some couples are able to get pregnant, but the pregnancies aren't viable. So like increasing the chance that you actually have a full, healthy, full-term pregnancy, live birth, and everything goes great. We go into egg quality, sperm quality, what to do for really common ovulatory issues like polycystic ovarian syndrome or hypothalamic amenorrhea, where somebody has lost their cycle, is no longer ovulating, how to restore the cycle in that situation. And yeah, just so much more. It's a very long book. I mean, it's like 30% longer than Real Food for Pregnancy. So if you thought that book was, wow, this is really like detailed and comprehensive, I feel like this book is in a whole nother league.
Right. Well, even better. I like the big books with more detail. So just, coming back, so we already looked a little bit about, the difference in guidelines for pregnancy. So again, what are you seeing, like, again, misinformation or around preconception health and nutrition?
Well, I just feel like there's not enough focus on preconception health at all. I feel like the standard, trajectory is not always to improve or even look into diet and lifestyle very much for either partner, but to just jump straight to fertility treatments. It's just like, okay, let's force ovulation with this medication or go through this procedure to, retrieve eggs and do IVF and whatever, without really looking at what's the underlying reason that ovulation isn't happening, or if there's a situation of like recurrent miscarriage, like, can we look into what's going on here? Is there some like underlying health issue that we haven't identified? Instead of like, a lot of times people aren't even able to get additional investigation until they've had like 2 or 3 miscarriages or more. There's also, I feel like, an assumption that it's something wrong with the woman, and they don't always look at male infertility. And actually 50% of infertility cases have some male factor involvement. So, why aren't we regularly running a semen analysis, or even doing that as a first step, since it's not invasive, to rule out that issue before you go through all the invasive stuff with the woman, or at least both at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's a really missed opportunity. The other thing that I think is really challenging, trying to pull in research on fertility it's really tricky. It's really tricky even to just find the right search terms in the medical literature, because there's so many different terms that things can be hidden under, where with pregnancy, it's fairly straightforward. It's like maternal something, pregnancy something, prenatal something, and it's pretty easy to find. But in addition to that, on the fertility front, I find that a lot of the research is actually fairly biased. You'll see these studies that are titled something like, animal protein is harmful to ovulatory function and plant protein is protective. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Let me read the study. You start looking at the data. I was like, wait a minute. Red meat had no negative impact on fertility. Wait, fish was protective of fertility. Wait, so were eggs. Wait a second. Not all the plant proteins were protective. The nuts and seeds actually scored the worst of all the animal and plant proteins for their effect on ovulatory function. Like, how did you even come up with the title of the study? But of course, like, for busy clinicians, you're just screening the study title and the abstract, and you're like, okay, yep, more of the same, plant protein, Mediterranean diet. It's like, why aren't you commenting on the study where they assigned women to a Mediterranean diet and their ovulatory function declined? What was going on there? Is it that the Mediterranean diet is bad? Was it something that shifted in their macronutrient intake that wasn't, supporting ovulation anymore? what was happening. And so there's definitely a bit of challenge in that part. We do try to address that in the book as well, by the way.
And I guess if when you look at the numbers of, about 50% of pregnancies being unplanned, this
Yes.
almost, like, your book almost makes sense. Or is this like, like, this is the diet, the optimal diet for women,
Yes.
or do you do, and you have men, like, this is the optimal diet, whether you're planning kids or not, this is what you should be eating. And yeah, okay.
And
So
for just overall hormonal health too. I've had some people reach out and be like, hey, can you write like real food for life or something? Or can you give some guidelines? I'm done having babies. I'm past the postpartum phase. Like, I don't think your book applies to me anymore. Like, what can I eat? And I mean, you'll see a lot of overlap in our recommendations. Of course, things are going to be different outside of pregnancy. You have different concerns and considerations. But at the end of the day, whether or not you want to have kids or want to have more kids, your hormonal balance and the, regularity of your menstrual cycle is a reflection of your overall health. I mean, when something is awry, one of the first functions your body will shut down is ovulation, because it's like, okay, we don't even want to entertain the possibility of pregnancy here, because this vessel is not capable of carrying a pregnancy to term. So we're not going to waste the energy on ovulation here. We have other priorities. Like, you can live without ovulating, right? It's not a life or death thing, but ovulation is a sign that your overall health is in a good place. So I am of the opinion that, a fertility supportive diet is really a lifelong healthy diet as well. You could pull in different research for different specific conditions or different life stages, but ultimately that sort of general rule carries through all our different life stages.
And then on again, supplements for somebody who is, again, I think, look at your diet first. Let's get your diet and other lifestyle factors in order first before you start throwing supplements into the mix. I think, if we get a good baseline of health and wellness, and then we look at, okay, so are there other supplements that will optimize our health? So what do you recommend in preconception for somebody who is actively trying to become pregnant, other than folate and I guess vitamin D? Is there anything else that you would suggest?
Yeah, and the folate and vitamin D should hopefully be covered in a comprehensive prenatal vitamin, which I think is a good idea in the childbearing years to begin with. So those two should be covered. There are going to be situations, it depends on the brand of prenatal or somebody's vitamin D levels, where you may need additional supplementation. They may benefit if they're not consuming, 12 ounces minimum of omega-3 rich fish per week. They might benefit from an omega-3 supplement that contains DHA, whether that's, fish or a different source. A DHA supplement is often necessary in those situations. And then if there are like specific concerns, specific issues with, maybe ovulatory function is not where it needs to be. Like for a woman who has PCOS, there might be some specific supplements that target insulin resistance that can be really helpful. We have a lot of, I would say, fairly strong data on the use of inositol to improve ovulation, to lower levels of insulin resistance. And that is a supplement that has no detrimental effects whatsoever on fertility or pregnancy. It is a very, very, very safe nutrient. In fact, it's actually kind of interesting. So I'll throw in an interesting tidbit. Not all neural tube defects can be prevented with supplementing folate or folic acid. And they found, they call them neural tube or folic acid resistant neural tube defects. And they actually have used co-supplementation with the two nutrients, inositol plus folate, to reduce the chances of a recurrent neural tube defect in a subsequent pregnancy. So inositol also has a neural tube defect preventative function in the body as well, in addition to its effects on improving blood sugar and insulin levels. There's also, a time and a place for supplementing specific antioxidants like alpha lipoic acid or CoQ10 There's quite a bit of data around those for improving actually both egg and sperm quality, so both partners could take it. Because a lot of times the quality of both of those can be related to like the overall levels of inflammation and oxidative stress in the body and like mitochondrial function. Those two antioxidants really do tend to target all of those. So there are others, but I'd say those would be some of the heavy hitters.
Great. And then for, can you tell me a little bit about the training that you're running? You're on prenatal, or not prenatal, preconception.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, so I have a professional mentorship program called the Institute for Prenatal Nutrition. So we train healthcare professionals in everything prenatal nutrition because there's no such certification on the market, really. So I went into this field totally flying blind and had to spend, unfortunately, a lot of trial and error, but also a lot of time in the literature figuring out what's going on with clients, kind of comparing notes on clinical outcomes and also the research. And so, yeah, this program is I would say, highly comprehensive. We pack a lot in about 15 weeks. We're meeting like every single week for class for 2 hours. And we have, Q&A session every week as well. There are also specific assignments where I can make sure you've mastered a particular skill set, because the clinicians that graduate from this are my referral network. And I don't want to refer anybody to anyone who's not well trained. So I want to make sure everybody has certain skills like really dialed in so I can be confident referring out. Since I'm not currently seeing clients at this point, I need a referral network. So for selfish reasons too, I have fun running the program because I can really work closely with individuals, keep the group small, and make sure they're well trained.
And it's a 15-week course, did you say?
Yes.
Okay, great. I will, tell us where we can find out more about the class and your books. And
yeah. Well, we are actually closing enrollment to the class for the 2024 round today. So by the time you listen to this, you can jump on the wait list for next year's class. So that's the Institute for Prenatal Nutrition. As for the new book, Real Food for Fertility, it comes out February 14th. So please check it out. Amazon would be the best place to purchase, since most book purchases happen on Amazon. Searching for it on there and purchasing on there really trains the search algorithm to show people who are searching for things on fertility to purchase this book. So definitely check it out there. And of course, you can find me on my website and social media. So lilynicholsrdn.com. And I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle is Lily Nichols RDN.
Great. Lily, thank you so much for spending the time today with me, sharing again your wonderful wisdom, and you put so much work into really like putting nutrition on the map, really, for pregnancy.
Thank you.
It's just been like wishy-washy for so many years. And one thing I have to say about Real Food for Gestational Diabetics, because that was your first book. I remember sitting on a plane actually, and I was reading it, and I had been speaking to a mom a couple of days before, and she had shared with me her meal plan that the hospital had given her. And I was like, oh, and then I read your meal plans in your book, and I'm like, oh, see, my mouth is watering reading through these. And then to think like, I mean, we're just like, because we're the system and the evidence is just so out of balance. We have all these poor women coming out of hospital with these really, like, I think it's like they're giving them paper to eat, like there's nothing
Cardboard.
The way they're, cut out, no sugar, and even sometimes even the recommendations on the sheet are just out of whack. But I always remember thinking, oh, Lily's food is always like her recipes, and even like on your Instagram as well, and you show like, what you're eating. It's like, yeah, that's food I can get behind. This, policing of diet and make really, pregnancy can be really hard on some women, and then if you have this added complication of gestational diabetes, it just can make it even more miserable. I think if you're just,
for sure,
getting through pregnancy and you're eating, oh, it just, yeah, cardboard, really.
I know what you're speaking of, and it's funny. I get that feedback a lot, like, "Oh, your meal plans actually sound good." I'm like, before I had decided to study nutrition, I was really on the fence about going to culinary school to become a chef
Those,
until I realized like the life of a chef was not the
yeah,
lifestyle I would want. I didn't want to be in a kitchen until 2 a.m., every night, sweating my life away. So I love to cook. I love food. I'm absolutely a foodie. I think healthy food should taste good. And once
yeah,
you start to dismantle all of these outdated rules on food about, fat being bad, salt being bad, meat being bad, and all of that, you open up the doors to really flavorful but also nutritious meals.
yeah,
And so I think that's a surprise to people that healthy food can also taste good because we're so used to so-called healthy food being like a boring like green
or,
juice or a salad without
okay,
dressing.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's just yeah, that's not where I stand. Not to mention, you look at those conventional gestational diabetes meal plans and they're so high in carbohydrates. If you've ever like tested your blood sugar and you look at one of those meal plans, you're like, "Wait, it's recommending, I mean literally from the guidelines on prenatal nutrition, they have a sample meal plan and the breakfast is oatmeal, strawberries, and low-fat milk." It's like where that's not enough protein for a meal, first of all, but that's also kind of a lot of carbohydrates for somebody who has blood sugar issues.
yeah.
So, yes, we can do better. And I try to make it delicious and while I do it too.
Well, I think you've done that. Great books, great recipes, and I think if for somebody who is learning a lot about nutrition, I think in pregnancy, I think you're more likely then to carry that on then into, when you're preparing meals for your family, and they're more likely then to be, the healthier. So I think it's a gift that keeps on giving when moms really kind of, get a handle on nutrition and nutrition that's satisfying and delicious. Great. Listen, thank again, Lily. Great to talk to you, and I look
Thank
forward to
you.
reading the new book.
Yes, I hope you love it. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Remember, empowerment begins with knowledge. If you enjoyed our time together and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Stay inspired, stay informed, and until next time, take care of yourself.